All right. Thanks for joining me today. My name is Dustin Mooney. I am with TechX Cyber and cyberfinders.com. TechX Cyber is a cybersecurity consulting firm that I own. I help businesses understand their cybersecurity needs and challenges. A lot like the discussion that we're going to have today is something that we may talk about and help you get on top of your cybersecurity program. I also provide digital forensics and incident response services. I can come in and help understand what happened after a compromise has occurred. The other project I work on is called Cyberfinders, cyberfinders.com. This is an online platform that allows businesses and corporations to come in and get matched with cybersecurity experts where there are needs for IT or cyber projects. A business can use the application to request help with an audit, with a penetration test, forensic services, lots of different options. And it allows experts to basically present themselves to bid on this project and say, hey, I'm ready to work for you. The customer gets to pick which experts they want to talk to and facilitates a meeting between these two entities and basically working to fill the cybersecurity gap as well as meet some needs in the industry where people are having a hard time finding help in the cyber industry. So if you need some help with your cybersecurity, go ahead and go to cyberfinders.com. All right, so today I wanted to bring up a cybersecurity topic that's been showing up a little bit in my work life here, and I've been giving it some thought. And I thought it may be a good topic to talk about and help people understand how this is part of your cybersecurity program. So I have been doing, this is my second video log. I think I'm going to continue doing these, but the way that I like to do them is just off the cuff here, right? So I have some notes in front of me of some topics I want to talk about, but this is really just things from my experience, things that I've observed, and some lessons learned that I've had over the years of being in cybersecurity for so long. And I think it's important for individuals and businesses and even other cyber experts to think about these topics because they are very important to the success of our business and the importance of highlighting risk, identifying risk, and then reducing it. So with that, let's get going. Today we're going to be talking about trust and trust modeling. And I think a good place to start with this would be to provide a definition of trust. Trust is a common word. I think it's something that everybody knows. Everybody probably uses on a day-to-day basis, but it's probably not something we actually spend a lot of time thinking about. So that's kind of what I wanted to highlight today is like, let's actually stop and think about it. So trust is defined by a belief that an entity or a person will behave in a way that is expected. Okay, so it's interesting. When I read that definition, I went, wow, it's a little bit of an assumption. Like you're assuming that somebody will do something that you believe is the right thing to do. Okay, so we trust somebody to behave in a certain way and they don't, we have this broken trust model. And again, just to repeat it, like if you're a business and you're an owner, you're a manager, there's actually like a lot of different scenarios where trust comes into play. And the problem that we have with this right now is that we don't actually give it much thought. Okay, and maybe we should be. And so when we don't give our trust models a lot of thought, what can happen is we actually have these risks that are impacting us and are existing in our work environments and our businesses, and they are there, but we haven't spent the time to identify them. And so I call these unrealized risks. These are things that are actually there, that are actually impacting us that we don't know about. Okay, so if we do spend some time to think about how we're trusting people, we can actually highlight risk and then possibly reduce that risk. Whereas if we don't go through this exercise, those unrealized risks just sit there, right? So that's why it's important to spend some time thinking about these things. So let's go ahead and do that. I want to do like a little exercise here, and I like to kind of just close my eyes and go inward and think about how my business or your business is trusting contractors, employees, service providers, online platforms. So you're trusting that all of these entities, all of these people will behave in a certain way. When you bring an employee in and you hire them, you are trusting that they have your best interest in mind. Now, we all know that there have been insider attacks on companies. People have stolen data and services, and right. So this trust model gets broken sometimes. And also with the service providers that you're working with. If you have a contractor that comes in and performs work for you, you're trusting that they're going to do a good job. You're trusting that they're going to protect your information and your assets. Okay, so there's a lot of trust that happens inside of a business in many different verticals and many different angles. Your employees are trusting you too, that you're going to pay them. And if you don't, right, that trust model is broken. And so we have this web really of interconnected trust between everybody at the business, whether we realize it or not. So it's important to spend some time and think about your role and the people that you rely on, and the people and the individuals and the contractors and the employees that you believe are going to actually be there for you and behave in the way that you expect them to, as well as thinking about what happens if they don't. Because that's a really important part of this too, because if we don't think about that, we may not be able to understand how we can reduce that risk when they don't, or how we can minimize the impact when they don't, because that's very important too. So I want to go into talking about what are some different types of trust models, right? So I want to bring up a document. Well, I'm going to mention a document. It's called NIST 139, excuse me. This is basically managing information security risks. This NIST is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. They produce a lot of very well documented technical discussions about, well, many different topics, but there is a whole series on cybersecurity. So we've got some really smart people that have figured out how do we approach risk, how do we think about protecting our businesses, what are as well as the technical implementations of what we need to do to make sure that the business is protected. It's all there, okay? So NIST has some great information, so NIST 800-139. And inside of this document, there is a very particular section that I tend to like to talk about, which is trust modeling. And so it outlines these very specific types of trust that we can find ourselves in. And I see these being in like two different categories. So I broke them up a little bit. So I want to go over a couple of those. The first one I feel is the one that we should be using. This is the better trust models, if you will, because it does talk about some others that I feel are a little bit less worthy, if you will. So let's start with the first one that I think is probably the best way to go. We call this validated trust. This is between two parties where either both have validated each other or one has validated the other. So if you're bringing in a vendor to do some sort of assessment, you're going to put them on your network, you're going to give them accounts to your data. We want to validate that company, that contractor, that individual, whoever that person is or that company is doing the right thing, that they're going to behave the right way. So what would that look like? And we're seeing this a lot in the insurance industry, where there may be a carrier that is selling a particular product, or maybe an MGA that's providing access to a carrier to sell a product. And that MGA is requiring that carrier to validate that they are performing some cybersecurity services or protections on their data, for their people, on their networks and their systems. This is validated trust. This is the one that we really kind of want to go towards. We need to do a check to make sure that the people we're bringing in, that we're going to trust, are operating from a place that we can expect that they're going to do the reasonable thing and what we expect them to do. So let's validate that. Let's actually check. Let's ask some questions. Let's look at their documentation around their cybersecurity policies, right? So validated trust is the way to go, okay? The next one that I think fits into this kind of maybe better category is a mediated trust. This is where a third party will assess back and forth and go, okay, you know what? You hired this contractor. I'm a third party. I came in and did an assessment. I believe that they are trustworthy, so you can go ahead and work with them. It is kind of a type of validated trust, but you're using somebody else to do it for you. Another one is called mandated trust. This one starts bleeding into the lines of maybe the ones we shouldn't be following or using. And mandated trust, I want to give an example of this. So, I did a lot of work in the insurance industry, and one thing that we saw was if you had a cybersecurity breach or incident and you filed a cyber liability claim, a lot of times those providers would say, here are the companies that you are allowed to work with to do a cybersecurity investigation. This is an example of mandated trust. You must work with these parties. So I think it also includes a validation as well, because the companies that get on these lists tend to have better reputations, tend to be trusted partners in the industry. So mandated trust can be validated trust, but not always. So other types of mandated trust, and this is kind of like, again, a little bit of a gray area, but if you have a law or a regulation that says you must do cybersecurity services, they're not telling you that you need to go trust a specific person or company to help you with this, but they are telling you that you need to trust somebody. Okay, you're either going to hire an employee to come in and meet your cybersecurity regulation requirements. You need to trust that employee is capable and has your best interests in mind. Or you need to bring in a third party. If you go to Cyberfinders, right, you can find that third party and bring them in to meet your mandated trust. And by the way, shameless plug here, that's the great thing about Cyberfinders, is that it really filters itself. There are rating systems for vendors that are coming in here. We are managing the trust for you. We're validating through a mediated third party who understands cybersecurity, who can look at these vendors and go, yes, we want them on our site, or no, these people don't meet our requirements. We don't believe that they will trust. We cannot trust them in a certain standard. So those are some of the more better trust models, if you will. I want to go down to some of the ones that are maybe okay, but could also introduce some problems. So this one is really, 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 I think, widespread and often very used. And you're going to see how these all kind of come together at the end. So the one that I want to mention here is called direct historical trust. So this is, I have a relationship with somebody. I'm going to continue believing that they will continue to act the way that I expect them to, even if I ask them to do something new for me. So let's say I've been working with an IT vendor for a long time, and I go to them and I say, hey, can you help me with my cyber too? You're not going to reevaluate that whole company. You already have a relationship with them. So you believe that they're going to continue providing the service that you want them to, and that they're going to behave the way that you expect them to. I also see this with, I want to call this like relational sharing, where you call your friend and say, hey, I need somebody to help me with my cybersecurity. And your friend says, oh, great, I work with this company, call them. This is an example of like an indirect relational trust. You are trusting somebody through a other trusted third party. And direct historical trust can be great, right? Relationships are important. This is part of the trust. Having that time and those experiences together built trust, even more trust. But the challenge with this is that sometimes you may be trusting somebody that you like, that you enjoy working with, but they don't have the actual capabilities to provide the service that you need. And the reason why I brought that up is that we see this a lot in the industry, where there are IT vendors who are working their way into cybersecurity where it's not really their bread and butter. And if you've been working with a vendor that provides your IT, you may assume that because you have this trust relationship with them, they are also capable of doing your cybersecurity services. Whereas if you use a validated trust model, or a mediated trust, where you brought in a third party that went, hey, is this IT person good enough for what I need? You might come to the conclusion that they're actually not somebody you could trust. And not that you can't trust that they have your best interest in mind, but you might not be able to trust them because they might not have the technical capabilities to understand what you need to do from a cybersecurity standpoint. So that takes me into my next one, and these next two are actually like really closely related with a very small difference in here. So let's see if I can get this right. So the two are blind trust and assumed trust. So blind trust is really, you have no knowledge of the relationship. You are bringing somebody in to do something for you. You are blindly trusting them. You're not validating it. You have not mediated it, and nobody's mandating that you work with them. And you could see how maybe this sounds like assumed trust, but it's not, because blind trust has no knowledge. Assumed trust means that you believe that you have knowledge about somebody, but you don't. So it can be just as dangerous. It's almost the same thing. It's all about what's happening in the mind. So the blind is like, I'm just not even going to worry about this. I just hope they're going to do the right thing. Whereas the assumed trust is, yeah, they're doing the right thing. They're helping me out. They know what they're doing, but they may not, right? And so blind trust, assumed trust, I think, with going along with that example with the IT provider, I think I see a lot of assumed trust. between businesses who bring in a managed service provider to perform their IT services, and they assume that cybersecurity is another skill set that they have and that they can do. And this is where I see big problems happening. This is where I see trust breaking down. Risk is being increased because we bring in an individual who's doing something that really is just not their best knowledge place. Okay. And so maybe just to expand on that a little bit, yes, IT and cybersecurity are related, but that does not mean that they're the exact same thing. Somebody who's gone through cybersecurity education, there are different tracks. You can go down a more managed services track. You can go down a more consulting track. You can go down more of a cybersecurity track. Okay. And so depending on which one you pick is going to make you an expert in that area. Now, if somebody asked me to come in and stand up their IT infrastructure, I would probably struggle. It'd take me a little bit to figure out. I might be able to work my way through it because I understand IT. I've been in the industry for a long time. But I'm not the guy for that. There's somebody else, there's another company, there's another person that's more than capable who lives in the world of IT that's going to really thrive and get a company set up. Same thing from the cyber aspect. You just flip the roles. If you come in and ask me to do your cyber, I'm going to kill it, right? I'm going to do great. I'm going to help you understand your business better and how all these cyber risks impact your business. Typical IT person, IT company is going to struggle unless they have specific knowledge and skills in consulting about cybersecurity and risk. So I want to take that down to my next concept, and then I'll wrap this up, is like, what are the implications of not using a trust model? And I guess if you say you're not using one, you're having blind trust or assumed trust. And so like, what can happen if we don't do that? Now, I mentioned this earlier in the presentation, in the discussion. Trust is something that we do. It's not really something that we spend a lot of time thinking about. So I just want to highlight that again. If we don't think about our trust models and choose from maybe that first category that I talked about, those first three, validated trust, mediated trust, mandate, if we don't pick one of those and use that to guide us in the way that we're going to trust the vendors and the contractors and the employees that we're working with, we are living in a world with blind trust, assumed trust, and risk. Risk is the result of using a blind trust model. Risk is a result of an assumed trust model. Whereas if we validate them, let me clarify that. Unidentified risk is the result of using a blind trust model or a assumed trust model. Identified risk is the result of using a validated trust or a mediated trust or mandated trust model. We can trust these companies because we know what the risks are with working with them, and then we can accept that risk. And maybe that's probably a whole nother discussion, accepting cybersecurity risk. Because you will never eliminate all of your risk. You will only reduce it. So we can assume that the risk is at a certain acceptable level. It's been reduced, and we can accept it and move forward. So other things that I want to talk about, maybe just highlight a little bit of an example of where this played out. I forget the year, but this is one of those massive data breaches that happened in the past. We remember Target getting attacked, and what came out after the investigation occurred was that Target was trusting a third-party HVAC vendor to have access into one of their systems. And once that access was compromised, the attackers were able to move laterally throughout the rest of the Target network. And so Target was working with this HVAC vendor and giving them access into the IT system, and they were using likely an assumed trust or blind trust model. They did not think that this company was going to be a target, which would lead to them being attacked. Okay, so think about that scenario and try to apply it to your actual company. Who has access into your information? Who can gain access and create and modify and change documents, view documents, send documents? And so like all of this data information that we probably want to keep confidential, who has access to that? And not only just who, but what systems, okay? So it's not just about the people. What systems are we introducing into our IT environments that also have access? So if a hacker wants to go after you, you might not be their first target. They may come to somebody, They may come to somebody, sorry, I made myself laugh there, to somebody else that is connected into your system, go after them so that they can get into you. And I want to talk about one more thing here that's kind of similar, right? If you watched my first video, I highly encourage you to. It was about business email compromise. I talked about how when a hacker compromises your email, they attempt to move laterally. And one thing that they do is they use the trust that's been established between the compromised email account, although we assume that we don't know it's compromised yet, the trust between that account and your vendors and your employees and your customers and people that you are selling things to and your partners. So there is trust that the information coming over your email to, let's just say, my email account, I can trust that what you're saying is accurate. But if that's been compromised, that trust model has been broken down. And so we always go to the impact. So if the trust model's been broken down, what happens? Right? We have impacts to the relationships between the companies. We have impacts to the reputation of your company as somebody who was negligent, who got hacked, who is now sending out phishing emails from an account that I believe I should trust. And now I can't. And so you might have to work to repair that trust if things happen. So this is why it's important to actually sit down and think about these things. Let me see, I got one more note here. Oh, I wanted to talk about due diligence and due care. And these are words that I use pretty often. So if you watch any of my other videos, they may come up. But due diligence and due care. So due diligence is doing the right thing or doing what it would be expected of you. It's very similar to trust. The due care is the follow through, the actual doing it. So if you own a company, you take in a lot of sensitive client information, your due diligence says that you should protect that information. Okay, you shouldn't just upload it to a public server where everybody can access it and steal customers' information. Okay, that would be not doing due diligence. So maybe you protect the document by uploading it to a secure website, right? This is your due diligence. Your due care is the follow through. We've encrypted this document. We use multi-factor authentication. We change passwords. Our employees have been educated on how to protect this information. That's the follow through that needs to happen to make sure you meet your due diligence. So part of your due diligence, part of your due care is to think about what type of trust models you or employee internally into your company. And I bet if you spent 10 to 15 minutes and just typed out some of your vendors, typed out your employees, typed out your managers, typed out the software platforms you're using, the cloud services that you're accessing. If you typed all that stuff up and you just kind of went, okay, how do I trust these people? Have I validated that I can trust them? Have I documented that I validated I can trust them? And which ones of these are operating in a blind trust model? And if you highlight those, you can quickly start looking at, wow, I've got a blind trust in a very important part of my business. I should probably get on top of that. So I'm going to pause there. I think that's a good stopping point, gives you some exercise to work on. And if you're going through that exercise and you go, ooh, like I need some help. I'm not understanding this. I need to know how to think about this. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm going to put my contact information as well as my websites. You can reach me at Dustin at TechX Cyber or Dustin at cyberfinders.com. Please go to my website, techxcyber.com. And if you're looking for a vendor who can kind of find some of these trust models for you, do an audit, do an assessment, check out Cyberfinders, create a request for work. You'll get a bunch of vendors coming in and telling you that they can help you, and you get to pick your favorites. So pretty simple. Thanks for listening. If you have questions, feel free to reach out. Be happy to chat with you and answer them. Thanks a lot.